if everybody is ready, I think we have all of the directors, as Laura said. So we do have all 5 of us. We'll start the May meeting of the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Directors. This is our second historic virtual meeting. Welcome, everybody, including those who just joined us to listen. I think we need to start, though, this morning by the state has asked us to start each of these meetings with a determination of why we're having an electronic meeting. And I've asked Jerry if he would make that motion, please.
Okay, John. I move that the Northern Virginia Soil and Water Conservation District Board of Directors has determined that the nature of the declared COVID-19 virus emergency makes it impractical or unsafe for us to assemble in a single location for the purpose of transacting business statutorily required or necessary for us to continue operations and discharge our lawful purposes, duties, and responsibilities. I so move.
Is there a second?
I'll second. This is Adria.
Thank you, Adria. It's been moved and seconded that we have determined we need an electronic meeting. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
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 John?
Nay. Motion carried. Thank you, Jerry and Adria.
John, you might want to do roll calls on the votes.
Yes, please.
Like the other day.
We probably should. All right. Well, I think we're ready for the minutes, Monica.
Yes. So I have reviewed the minutes.
Everybody should have received a copy from Heather.
Yeah. So I've reviewed the minutes and I would need to recommend approval. No changes.
So we have a motion to approve the minutes. Is there a second?
This is Adriel, second.
Been moved and seconded. The minutes as presented be approved. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye. This is Adria. Aye.
Jerry?
Aye.
Aye.
Chris, aye.
Motion carried. All right, Chris, I think we're ready for the treasurer's report, which was also
April.
sent to us.
I've reviewed the April 2020 Treasury Report and submitted for audit.
Okay, the report will be received and saved for audit. I think we are now at the point we're talking about the retirement benefit alternative and authorization for an actuarial study. And I'm not sure, Chris, are you going to talk about that, you and Heather?
I have talked to Laura and Heather at some length about it. Heather's got lots of details, and the proposal is to have an actuary study done by the VERS staff to look at the cost and how it would affect us. But Heather's got some further discussion, so I'll turn it over to her.
Okay, great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Yes.
I can.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. As Chris mentioned, the proposal for approving an actuarial study is in your board binders. Well, it was sent to you. You don't have binders, I guess.
We have it.
And as has been mentioned many times, this has been something that has been on our to-do list as a part of our strategic plan to provide the best benefits we can to our staff and with the to recruit and retain high quality staff. And as you all know, for some years now, the district has been using a simplified employee pension plan, nicknamed SEP. And this is a very simple plan. We provide 5% on top of gross salary twice a year to individual retirement accounts set up just for this purpose. It's really easy. Sometimes the setup is a little complicated when the employees first join, but the administration of it is very simple. However, it does not allow the employees to contribute to their own plan, nor does it allow any kind of company match on top of that. And so we have been exploring some additional options, and the most obvious choice would be for us to join with the Virginia retirement system. This is the system that is it's a state agency that operates it. We are able to join because we are a political subdivision of the Commonwealth. And approximately 45 out of the 47 soil and water conservation districts participate either through their district directly or through the county that they are affiliated with. And I provided background information for you in the package, but the Virginia Retirement System program is a little bit more complicated. It has two components: a defined benefit component and a defined contribution component. And the defined benefit is more like a traditional pension plan, and the defined contribution is more like an IRA. Each component has mandatory contributions for both the employee and the employer. It also allows for the employee to make voluntary contributions, which are matched up to a certain amount by the employer. The base rates that we would pay as an agency for the employer portion are calculated by an actuarial study. And in order for us to move forward, decide whether this would be the best program for us and what it would cost and how it would fit in the budget, the first step from VRS is to conduct an actuarial study. The actuarial study is $1,250, and then there are additional components that can be added to it based on what other scenarios we want to investigate. So at this point, we're not asking for approval of the program, just approval for the funds to take the next step in the investigation process. And just very, very briefly, the other scenarios would be what our options are for purchasing time service credits for employees who have already been with the agency for a long time, or for any other time period we determine, whether or not employees would be able to use their SEP funds to purchase back service credits for the vesting portion of the program, and those kinds of things. And that's why we are asking for the board to approve a $1,250 plus up to $2,500 for these additional scenarios, which we are in talks with VRS, and we will know more after we have some of our questions answered, just how many of those scenarios we will need to move forward with. So I would be happy to answer any questions, and then turn it over to Chris for any motion that he wants to make.
So Heather, the next step would just be the actuarial study.
That is correct.
And how long do we anticipate that might take?
We don't really know, but I'm guessing it would be a month or two. We need to send them census data, as well as specify what scenarios we would like them to run. And then it may be sooner than that, but I'm guessing a month or two. Before we do that, we will be having a phone conversation with the VRS representative to get some of our questions answered. And I think that is, we discussed yesterday that that's something that the Finance Committee would participate in, so that yourself and Chris would have an opportunity to ask questions as well and to hear what their answers are.
Would some of our longer tenured employees have to join it if we moved in that direction?
That's a good question. My understanding is that when we first join, employees have the option to opt out. I do not know if everybody can opt out or how many, if we need a certain number in order to participate. That's one of the main questions we have. However, once the district joins the plan, the any employees who come on board after that would be required to participate.
Right. Some of these are policy decisions that as an organization we would need to make as well, but we are still in that information gathering stage, and this is just really we've been compiling a number of these kinds of questions. We've talked with staff and are encouraging them to also provide us with any questions that they may have, that we can continue to work with the VRS representatives to make sure that this is the right plan. we're not committing ourselves to the plan at this point, because it is one of those things, and we were talking with Chris about this yesterday. Once, as an organization, we go into VRS, there's no turning back. It becomes the permanent retirement system for the Soil and Water Conservation District. So we want to make sure that it's right for us. But we can't get a lot of those questions answered. We can't understand what the implications in terms of costs to the organization are going to be until we have the actuarial study. That way we can make an informed decision as to which direction we want to go. There is certainly a benefit to going with the VRS system, but again, we want to make sure that it is the right program for our organization.
It seems like the time to have a motion to approve the actuarial study. Chris, are you going to make such a motion?
Yes, I am. And just to reiterate, John, that I did mention yesterday to Laura and Heather that I'd like to be involved and understand the discussions as they go along. And then we jointly decided that the finance committee, including you too, with me, would be intimately involved more than maybe normal in some situations like this, because it has such a long-term effect for everybody.
We have a motion to approve the conduct of the actuarial study. Is there a second?
Oh, I actually didn't make the motion yet.
Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you did.
That was just a precursor that the finance committee should stay very
I'm sorry.
involved. But I'd like to make a motion to authorize the executive director to contract with the VRS system to perform a basic actuarially study plus additional scenarios for a cost up to $2,500.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Been moved and seconded. Any
By
further
Adria.
discussion? That was Adria, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Monica, aye.
Chris,
I think I heard Monica, Jerry, and Chris.
This is Adria. Yeah, aye.
So that's everybody. We don't need to ask if there's anybody opposed. There isn't. Approved. Well done, both Heather and Chris. I'm kind of anxious to see where this goes, personally. Having gone through this with CSRS and FERS on the federal side, this is going to be a very interesting and important discussion and decision for our board to make. How long do you think, Laura, it's going to take to get all this in hand to where we can actually make a decision, go or no go?
Well, I'm hoping that we can have enough information to be able to consider what would be necessary for the FY 2021 budget. That should give us some good ideas. So we actually, it's kind of one of the questions that we have for the VRS representative is what's the best timing for this? It could be at the start of the new calendar year, or it could be the start of the new fiscal year. So we still have some of those questions moving forward, but this has been something that's been on our a goal of ours for quite some time, and I am hoping that we can roll it out within the next year.
Good. Heather or Chris, anything else that you'd like to say at this point?
not for me.
I don't think so. Thank you.
I think we're down to the remote participation for the board of directors policy, which Heather also sent to us. Laura?
Yes, so this was in your board package. This was number 5, remote participation policy. When we, this is kind of, again, a carry on to a response to the COVID situation. As you all know, the governor is starting to phase in the opening back up of the Commonwealth. And the caboose bill, Executive Order 51, which allowed us to go into electronic meetings and allowing us to do remote participation meetings for 100% of all of our board members, is going to be lightening up here over the course of the next month, unless Debbie is aware of any other sort of changes. But this does mean that we are going to need to be thinking about how we begin to phase back in our board meetings with having 3 individuals within at least having a quorum in person, but also allowing for remote participation. Right now, our policies and the state FOIA guidance states that unless there is a policy among the district or any government organization that states otherwise, those board members that are participating remotely may only do so through a listening format. They may not actually participate in a dialogue or vote in the meeting. What this policy will allow is to have more extensive participation from our board members through if they need to participate remotely. So if you all will just allow me to summarize here, it is necessary that the board member notify the chair that they will be unable to attend either a personal matter or temporary permanent disability or any other medical condition that is going to limit their physical presence. And so it's, again, the board members would need to communicate with the board chair on that. We do still need to have a physical quorum. So we would still need to have those 3 board members in the same room having a quorum. But again, this would allow for the participation of those board members who are unable to participate in person to, again, give them the authority to vote and communicate in any discussion. We are limiting the participation of absent members due to these personal matters to 2 meetings per year of the board or committee meetings. And then for any remote participation, the board or committee will make arrangements for voice communication. And we're very fortunate that we've got those capabilities either within our conference room or within the large board meeting room as well. So long as we have, again, an in-person quorum, it really doesn't have any sort of FOIA implications for us. We still are meeting the open meeting laws and requirements. But again, this just allows the opportunity for participation in voting and in discussion, which by the current policy that is available, we do not have that opportunity. The board members do not have that opportunity. So that is the recommended policy moving forward. And I'll leave it to that if there's any questions or that I might be able to answer.
Laura, this is Jerry. Have you heard anything? I know you've been keeping track of what's being done with FOIA. The Virginia Association has, as I know, been feeding us a lot of good information. The solution to this long term, this is an interim solution that you're recommending. Long term, FOIA has got to be reconsidered. We can't do that. Our group can't do that. But the media has gotten so sophisticated. The need, as witnessed by this pandemic, is going to happen. They've got to change it. This is silly. We're having to do workarounds like this.
Well, that's a good point, and unfortunately, that's out of our hands. It's going to take some executive orders in order to do that, but absolutely, I think that this is opening up a lot of perspective and the ability to continue to have operations and things like Webex, where I can see everybody, and we can continue to have these kinds of dialogues and moving forward. This is actually, this policy, I would suggest not having an expiration date on this, because I do think that this is something that would be beneficial all in all. But I have not heard anything at this point as to whether or not they're going to make any sort of permanent changes for the allowance of electronic meetings moving forward. However, there is always the chance of an extension of the executive order or a new executive order, which would allow for this. But I think one of the things that we need to be prepared for is in June, having an in-person quorum. And those are some of the things that we're going to be making some accommodations for within our office to be able to provide that kind of setting. Or we can find another setting that is more comfortable for everyone. So,
Laura, was this designed to just be for the period of the virus, the effect of the virus, or was it designed to go on permanently?
This policy that is presented, the remote participation policy, is that what you're asking, John?
Yes.
I would suggest that this be a permanent policy within our document. So it would not just be the period of time for the pandemic. It would be continuous.
Do we know if any other conservation districts in the Commonwealth are adopting such a policy?
Yes, actually, Thomas Jefferson, this is one of their policies again. We presented something from them last time. They've really been on top of things, and this is they have adopted this policy as well.
Laura, the current FOIA, without getting into policy changes, allows directors to phone in, and like you say, listen and not participate and not vote. Can we just on our own motion change that?
Yes, unless there's a policy, we have a policy in place that allows that, then yes, we can make that accommodation.
I'm not sure I quite understood what that accommodation was.
The accommodation is to allow for board members who are participating remotely in the meeting to be able to participate in the discussion and vote.
Okay, all right.
Okay. Then what effect does FOIA have? If FOIA is saying you can only watch and listen, you can't vote and you can't speak, how can we override that on our own motion? I'm going to ask the question again. I don't understand. What's the authority that gives us the ability to do it? Well, we could have done this 10 years ago, if that's the case.
We could have. And I think that this is just one of those things coming forward that we are, if we don't have a policy in place, we don't have something to lean back on. And it seems like we're making a game time decision. So what we're establishing now is an opportunity for the board members to participate. So the question that that you have in terms of whether or not we're going above and beyond FOIA is FOIA does allow, does provide some allowances so long as we are making it a policy.
Even though Thomas Jefferson has approved this policy, how does DCR feel about it?
Actually, Debbie just suggested unmuting her. I'm not sure if I have the capabilities to do that. That's KCM.
Okay, so this was a new change in the FOIA guidance that became effective last July. One that kind of slipped by and we didn't actually understand it until most recently. But there is a provision in the FOIA code before COVID to allow remote participation. So the policy that you're looking at now could have been a policy that you set before COVID. So that is one relaxation of FOIA that took place before COVID-19.
Oh, good. Thank you, David.
That's
Allows, but you still have to have a physical quorum of 3 in your case. For a district like Thomas Jefferson, they have to have a physical quorum of 7 before a director would participate. Before July the 1st year, you're absolutely right that that the only thing that you could do, like remember when you broke your leg or you had a problem with your leg or whatever, you were able to call in, but all you could do was listen. You could not participate. You could not vote. I don't even think you were supposed to even enter into the discussion. So this is a little, this is one small baby step forward that FOIA had made in the code. And again, it kind of slipped by DCR, like we didn't know it. As a matter of fact, I didn't know it until after I'd done the training. So when I did the training for Chris and Monica, I trained the old way.
Okay, that answers my question.
I understand what Laura said, and I'm not looking at that policy now because we're on the video, but any director can only use that option twice during the course of a year. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's very limited, and it is for, and your board still has to approve. And I think in your policy, the chair actually approves it, but there has to be some approval of that personal, whatever that issue is. And I'm sure boards will be very lenient on that, but you can only use it twice a year. So let's just say
Well, I can see times when that would have been very helpful, even with our board, for example, when Jana was on our board. So
Right, but twice a year. So somebody has to manage all that too, and that's
Right.
the other thing. You know, it has to be managed. Thank you for unmuting me. You can mute me again.
Would any of the directors want to make a motion that we adopt that policy?
I would so move. Jerry.
I'll
Jerry?
second.
And who seconded?
Monica.
It's been moved and seconded that we adopt this policy. Is there any further discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye.
This is Adria, I.
Jerry, aye.
Chris,
Monica, aye.
Sounds like Chris and Monica both said aye. So again, there are no need for any nays. All right, I think we're down. Dan is going to talk to us about a proposal to analyze soil compaction in Arlington County. Dan?
Hi, everybody. Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So yes, we've been in discussions with staff from the Department of Environmental Services in Arlington County to analyze soil compaction and general density. They're interested in looking at the quality of soil at new construction sites, basically houses that are undergoing construction right now and have not been occupied yet, and comparing them to existing residential construction to see if there's any measurable differences in the amount of compaction and the infiltration capacity of those soils and other qualities to see if there might be some effect on stormwater volume and stormwater quality coming off these many infill developments that are getting put in Arlington. So what we're proposing to do is pick 10 properties, 5 older residential properties, 5 brand new residential properties, and to perform infiltration testing, soil penetration or soil strength testing, density testing, and soil texture analysis. 2 samples of each of those tests on each of those 10 properties. It would be myself and Maria doing the field work and the analysis of the results, and we would present to Arlington after we're done. Obviously, a summary of the results, some basic analysis, statistical analysis, and a short report for them. I think this would be, although it's all going to be happening in Arlington County, I think it will be interesting data for Fairfax as well, because there certainly is a lot of infill development going on here. And it would be interesting to know if there is a significant difference between the quality of soil at these new developments versus our existing residential stock.
Dan, has Arlington asked us to assist them in this way?
Yes, that's what got the ball rolling. I was actually doing a presentation with some of their staff members for an unrelated project, and they tapped me on the shoulder after one of those meetings and asked if we'd be interested in participating. So it was their initiative initially, and we have done contract work for Arlington in the past, which is probably why they thought of us. But yes, this is something that they wanted to do, and they were asking us to put forth a proposal for them.
And would they reimburse our district for your time?
They would. We, in the project proposal, we have an estimated budget of $3,285.90. We have not sent this to Arlington yet, but that would be reimbursement for my time, for Maria's time, travel expenses, and then all the laboratory testing that would be done.
That sounds like a deal.
how much of that is laboratory testing?
Just slightly over $1,000 for laboratory testing.
For $2,000, you and Maria are going to attend 10 sites?
Yes.
What?
Let me, it's $1,990 estimated for personnel costs and $1,295 estimated for laboratory costs and vehicle travel.
Wow.
Sounds like a bargain.
It
Yeah, really?
sounds like too good a bargain.
Yeah.
It's based off an estimate of our hourly rates plus a little bit extra for overhead.
Okay. Yeah, would one of the directors like to authorize or make a motion that we authorize that proposal to analyze soil compaction in Arlington County?
This is Adria. I'll make a motion to move forward with that work.
We have a motion. Is there a second?
I'll
I'll
second.
second it, Chris.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd still like to know more about the rates. That, in the consulting world, you can't do anything for that.
You can't write the proposal for $3,000.
Just remember, we're not consultants. And this
So
is
you,
the
you-
challenge.
Well, maybe that's the problem.
I think Dan used the word consult twice. And have we used these hourly rates before? And does that include all of the administrative and benefits, particularly if we start a new benefits package in those rates? And did Arlington indicate any price that they were anticipating?
Arlington did not have an indicated price for us. I can give you the estimated hourly rates for myself. We estimated it $51.25 per hour, and for Maria it was $47.50 per hour.
Can I suggest, Dan, that I think Chris is leading there, that we do include some overhead and some of the other costs, the indirect costs that go on with our doing work. Maybe, Chris, you could look at this and see what you think in terms of blessing this up.
We do have some overhead included in there. The actual hourly rates that Heather calculated for us would be, I think for me it was $41 an hour, and for Maria it was $38 an hour, and we bumped those up by about $10 an hour to account for overhead and administrative costs.
Oh, okay, 25%.
Laura, do you have any comments on that?
I do. I've reviewed the proposal, and one of the things that Dan and I had some conversation about was the amount of time that it was going to take to do some of this work, and making sure that that was accurate, but also provided some there were some areas where he's gone back and he's taken a look at whether or not there was adequate time for reporting and things like that too, in preparation of some of those reports, or even presenting some of those things. So what he's presented is what his and we've talked about as well the value that he brings, and making sure that he's trying to capture all of that. And I think what we're looking at is a scope of work that he feels provides that best available information. We are a bargain. We are absolutely a bargain.
Oh yeah.
And that is one of the ways that we can also perhaps roll this over into some additional work associated with Arlington County, or see where this rolls out for other initiatives in Fairfax County as well. So it is something that I think overall, from a proposal standpoint, there's a little bit more to it, I think, than just including the overhead rate. And that's maybe a larger conversation to have with the Finance Committee. And Jerry, it would be great to have that conversation with you too, as we're thinking about the rates that we're putting forward, not just overhead. So,
because we have, as we've talked before, sorry, Laura.
Okay.
So we've got a tremendous staff that at these bargain rates could do a lot of benefit for other people's, either other counties or other opportunities that may come up. I'd like to make sure that in the beginning we start being fair to the staff, that they don't end up feeling pressured to do a good job and didn't put enough hours in it. And I won't admit to underbidding many projects, but I certainly have. But to be fair to us, to be fair to the district, and to be fair to the people that we're doing work for. Consultants have loading rates anywhere from 1.5 to 3.5 or 4.
Yeah.
I mean, to cover all the other things that go into providing staff hours. And, Heather might take a pretty close look at that for going forward, because I don't want to set something in stone that we start developing expectations from some people, and they want to get the same rates in the future.
If this sets a precedent and we're locked into very low rates, then Arlington, Fairfax City, and a lot of others might come in and say, "Well, we want the same deal." But Laura, we've done contract work for other parties before, right?
Yes, we have.
We've had a long time historical relationship with Arlington, Fairfax, Alexandria, Falls Church.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well.
John, what do you think?
Pardon me?
What do you think? We've got 3 consultants here.
Well, I thought it was a bargain. However, from what Dan has described, I think he's done this with Arlington and others before. So I'm presuming he knows exactly how long it's going to take he and Monica to do anything else. So,
Maria.
or Maria, excuse me.
Okay, I wish I could do soil compaction.
I just have a quick question, if you don't mind, to add to the discussion. Have we added in any kind of travel, what the mileage and stuff, Dan? I'm sure you did.
He said he did.
Yes. Yeah, just that's an estimate of the back and forth between the sites at the federal rate, which I think is about 58 cents per mile.
And the daily maintenance fee for our vehicle and how much it might cost for that daily maintenance fee, and wrap that in?
I didn't put a maintenance fee in, just the
Let's
federal
put
mileage
that
rate.
in.
Well, that's usually in the 57.5 cents.
Yeah.
Right, but this is our vehicle that we're paying for the county. It's not a personal vehicle. It's not, in my opinion,
True.
I think, I would imagine you would be using a vehicle that is a county-owned or soil and water-owned vehicle that we are paying maintenance on. Is that right?
Correct.
And can we add that in, please?
We can definitely take a look at that.
Okay.
And Dan, maybe one of the things that might be helpful is to understand what the breadth of the work is, because I think one component to the cost is our rate, right? And then the other component is how much time it takes to do some of this work. And Dan, maybe you can share a little bit about what your thoughts are for the 10 residential properties that you would be going out at, and what you would be doing at each one of those sites and the estimated time that it would take in order to do that.
That'd be good.
We're trying to make it fast and light. So
Okay.
infiltration testing would be done on site. The soil strength testing is basically a soil penetrometer, which is a fancy word for a spike with a pressure gauge on the top, and you push it down into the soil and read how much pounds per square inch of effort it takes to push the probe down. So you can get a lot of data pretty quickly with a device like that. The density testing, we basically extract a sample of soil inside a little brass ring of known volume, and we send that off to the lab, and they just dry it and weigh it. So it takes a little bit longer to do that, but it's pretty easy to take those samples all in one day and send it off to the lab later that afternoon. And then the texture samples will be done at the lab as well too. So if we can get sites that are pretty close together, we could potentially finish 2, maybe even 3 sites per day.
How many samples per site are you looking at?
We're looking at 2 density samples per site, 2 infiltration tests per site, and 2 soil texture analyses per site. For the penetrometer test, we'd probably take a minimum of 20, but again, that's as simple as poking a stick into the ground. So you could take 100 penetrometer readings in less than an hour if you wanted to. So I think we're estimating we could do multiple sites per day, and the field work would get done within a week, and certainly not 40 hours of work, but within a week we could schedule it all.
Dan, a technical question. Can we extrapolate from the data you're going to be collecting to a runoff coefficient?
Well, yes, we probably could, but since we'll have the infiltration rates directly, that would be the best data to use.
Subsoil, yeah.
Yeah.
How deep are you going with the infiltration test?
It'll be a surface infiltration, so right at the surface.
Okay,
yeah.
But that would okay.
And the density testing will probably be done within the first 4 to 6 inches.
Gotcha.
So it's pretty shallow stuff. They're really interested in, like you said, runoff. So they want shallow surface and shallow subsurface analysis.
Because their intent, they're looking at the possibility of developing some background information so they can justify requiring developers to prepare the soils better, correct?
That's correct. Yes, they want to know if I believe that their thought is that newer development is treating the soil more poorly than older development, which may not necessarily even be a process of the development itself, but the fact that we're putting in very large houses on smaller lots and therefore more of the soil gets disturbed. But that would be my inkling as well too, but they need some data to prove it. And it could be we go there and the data's not there, that the new sites and the old sites are fairly comparable. And that's fine too. But if they do find a significant difference, they could use it at their discretion to put in some policy changes requiring that the soil be amended, be decompacted before the residential permit is cleared. The house can
And
be
how would,
occupied.
Dan, how would what you learn in Arlington County be helpful to us in Fairfax County?
Well, I don't think that the style of development there would be any different than what developers are doing here. Probably theirs is a bit more intense just because they're dealing with smaller lots, smaller properties. But the infill that they're seeing there is pretty much the same as the infill that we're seeing here. Older houses getting knocked down and larger houses being put in place. And it's not like the construction practices change from one side of the border to the other. So I think it would be pretty direct comparison to the results we would find here.
Dan, this is Chris. Are you going to evaluate, areas of compaction, topography, drainage channels?
No, it would be very limited just to, we're going to try and limit ourselves to the areas, basically the lawn areas of the properties, areas that we think were likely disturbed in some form or fashion when the house or the subdivision was being built.
And Dan, one of the things that you mentioned is there is a protocol that you're going to be following that was developed by UMBC. Is that right?
That's right. There's a professor at University of Maryland, Baltimore County, named Stu Schwartz, who's not related to me, who has been doing a lot of work on urban soil remediation, urban soil compaction, and he's got a good basic field guide that he uses with his summer student interns. And we may not follow it 100%, but we're going to follow it 95% of the way. So we've got a protocol in place.
Laura, do the county staff ever contract out?
I'm not sure what you mean. Contract us out or contract with us? Or
No, do they ever get asked to, provide staff expertise for a fee?
Not that I'm aware of. Not that I'm aware of.
Because there's reimbursement amounts for if they have to do something for certain projects. I don't remember the details, but I know I've had discussions on it. And not that I want to open a can of worms, but Dan, your and Maria rates are just phenomenal for your skill abilities in what you could see in the open market for those rates, and I'm just amazed.
Is there any other discussion before we have a motion that we approve the project reimbursement, or excuse me, the soil compaction study for Arlington County? Any other discussion?
Have these has the rate been discussed with the county? And we said, can you handle $3,000 or?
No, we haven't discussed that yet.
Okay.
We're just going to submit this proposal.
Yes, that was the idea, was to get it approved here and then submit it to them. They have been waiting on it, so I was hoping to get it to them fairly soon, but I haven't floated a range of costs with them yet, so it's going to be a cold call, if you will.
It's already been suggested, I think, that maybe the finance committee, and I'd like to be part of it, talk about consulting rates. But for now, since they asked for it, we should respond. Let's go ahead. I'd support go ahead and sending what we have now. But let's not let the issue fester. I think we need to come up with a rational policy we can justify, and make sure we're covering our costs.
Any other discussion? We do have a motion that we authorize proposal to analyze the soil compaction in Arlington County. It's been moved and seconded. If there's no other discussion, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Jerry, aye.
Adria, aye.
Chris, I was waiting for Monica.
Oh, Monica and I.
It's been approved.
Mr. Chairman, if I can just interrupt, I didn't hear who moved and seconded that motion.
I have written down that it was Adria who moved and Chris who seconded.
Perfect. Thank you so much.
And we probably do want to take a little look at the rates we're charging others. But remember, too, we have this historic relationship with these other jurisdictions which do not have conservation districts. And so they usually turn to us when they need our assistance. I think we're down again to Dan and Christina on VCAP project approval and project reimbursement.
Yeah, thanks. Good morning, everybody. If I could get presentation abilities, I can go ahead and share the PowerPoint, and Dan and I can go over the one project for approval and the 3 projects up for payment. So pull that up now. Okay, so like I mentioned earlier, we have one project for approval up this month. It was a resubmission of a rain garden project back from March. And then we have one CAP HOA project completion that's ready for payment and 2 VCAP projects that are ready for payment as well. So I'm gonna hand it over to Dan for this one to present the one project for approval.
All right, thanks, Christina. So this is project 21-2020-032. Originally, they had proposed a rain garden, but they've switched over to conservation landscaping. And they are proposing 396 square feet of total conservation landscaping. You can see their residence right here. It's an older property with a fairly large backyard. The area that's highlighted in red on the left side of the property is the proposed conservation landscaping area. See if you can move to the next slide. So this property is actually just north of Interstate 66 and the city of Fairfax. It is kind of sandwiched in a triangle between Route 123 to the east, Germantown Road to the west, which you can see on the map here, and then Interstate 66 just below. And it's at the very, very far headwaters of Accoting Creek. There's a small, I believe it's almost not quite a perennial creek that runs, starts in the neighboring property just downhill from them. If you look to the image on your right, you can see that the property is very sloped, and they also have a very large new infill house with over 5,000 square feet of rooftop that drains down to their property. So not only do they have a steep slope, they have a significant amount of impervious roof and pool and driveway, both their property and the neighbor's property, that drain through their backyard and off into this creek down in the neighbor's yard just below them. And again, that small red area, which you can see on the property, is their proposed conservation landscaping area. Next slide, please. So these are some good photos that they sent of the property during a heavy rainstorm. If you start on the left, you can see a very large volume of water that flows through their property. That's coming from both their house and the neighboring house, as well as just direct runoff. The water flows across their property. If you look to the right, it goes down to a shed that they have in the far back corner of their property and kind of flows both around and behind the shed. And that's a picture in the middle of the soil in some of the heavier flow paths. They say they aerate, they amend with compost and other materials every year, but they haven't been able to get grass to grow because the volume of water that's coming through has just blown everything off. So they've got a lot of bare soil, and they want to cover that with conservation landscaping. This is their preliminary planting plan. It's not a huge conservation landscaping area, 396 square feet, but it's pretty densely planted. So they're proposing to put in 192 total plants with a lot of ferns, a lot of sedges, some phlox, some aster, a lot of good low-growing ground cover type plants to hold the soil in place, mixed in with a few larger shrubs as well too. Looks like a fairly nice plant. The Drainage area for this conservation landscaping is 7,217 square feet, of which most of that, 6,472, is their lawn and garden draining down to the conservation landscaping area. And they're also going to be passing about 750 square feet of their rooftop runoff through the conservation landscaping area. Their total costs are estimated to be $9,900, and they're requesting $3,500 in cap cost share.
Dan, this is Jerry. I'm looking at the total cost of this project. You know, it doesn't require any engineering. There's no structural, considerations. $25 a square foot. At some place, cost realism has got to be factored into these approvals. And this one's not going to pass on that basis. $25 a square foot. My goodness. How do we justify this to ourselves, guys? That's a rhetorical question to all the board members.
Should we make a motion first to approve it before we're discussing?
We probably should. Is there a motion that we approve this VCAP project?
I'll make a motion so that we can start the discussion.
It's been moved that this VCAP project be approved. Is there a second?
I'll second for discussion.
Monica will second. Any further discussion? Now is a good time, Adria.
Okay, so you're saying that this costs too much per square foot, Jerry? That's your concern?
In terms of watershed protection and all the things that we've joined this district to do, there are so many more worthy projects that cost a lot less than $25 a square foot. Now that's $10 a square foot out of our pockets, but that's still, somebody's going to look back at VCAP in the future and go, my goodness, our cost per unit of whatever pollutant you want to talk about to prevent going into the rivers and the bay are so much higher than everything else. How did we do this? I've asked the question before. We really haven't addressed it. The steering committee hasn't addressed it. But this project really brings it to the front. This is a cost that's comparable to our permeable pavers, and it's just conservation landscaping. I don't get it.
I thought you were a big fan of conservation landscaping.
Not at $25 a square foot. And, I've also some of our conservation landscape projects, because the designer wants to do it that way, or the homeowner wants to do it that way, have put in very expensive mature plants, and they end up with an instant visual benefit to the homeowner. I get it. How much are we as a pollutant control agency, as a soil and water control agency, going to sponsor that?
Hi, everyone. This is Christina chiming in. I do want to just put it into perspective a little bit. I've been talking with some landscape designers and contractors lately, just sort of getting an idea of how the current pandemic has affected supply. So, not saying that this is just more of an explanation as to why this one might be a little bit more expensive. Surely it could be, a homeowner decision to plant this densely in this area. So of course, those more dense plantings are going to cost a little bit more just in general. Number two, some people have been having a much harder time sourcing plants than others, with people at home and getting involved in their landscaping a little bit more and getting their spring projects done. Some people have told me that sourcing plants and making substitutions is playing in a little bit to the cost of how much these projects are turning out to be. With that being said, I know we've approved this to send to the steering committee, but we could suggest, because I do foresee us having that same discussion at the steering committee meeting about the cost per square foot. But, we could suggest, using less plants, using smaller plants. We always do that with every conservation landscaping project that is sent in and comes in a little over the top. So, I just wanted to give a little bit of that background.
Christina, did these people have a professional landscaper come in and design this for them?
Oh, yeah.
They did, yes. And if you guys remember, back in March, this is one of two projects that was originally supposed to be a rain garden, or actually a bioretention just based on the size. So they were approved at the steering committee level for their bioretention, for their first bioretention project. And we suggested to them to do a conservation landscaping project because, keeping costs and everything in mind, and also just, just costs in mind. I think with both the rain gardens, it was a lot more expensive than this. So just wanted to provide some background information and explanation behind the price. With that being said, we are happy to, talk to the homeowners. We've gone back to applicants before and encouraged them to maybe seek smaller plants as a cost savings to them. So a lot of the times people who have their VCAP projects, they're not, their first time, full landscape, this is the first landscape endeavor that they've taken on that's this huge. So a lot of the times they might not be as informed in terms of price of how much these types of things might cost, but we can certainly bring that back to the homeowner and make sure.
Homeowner, or you talking about the designer? First time.
Sorry, what was that question?
When you say this is the first time they've considered a project like this, is that the homeowner or the designer?
I'm just saying in general, VCAP is the first time a lot of people take on large landscape projects because it's the first time, it might be and I don't know the history behind this homeowner. Dan, feel free to chime in if you have any other insights, but I'm just saying in general, a lot of the times people go into these projects not necessarily knowing how much it'll cost. We try to give them our best estimate of how much it will generally fall into, but there's a lot of things that factor into this cost. There, warranties might come into play, where they source their plants might come into play. This particular landscape designer might have had to do a little extra sourcing of the plants, therefore the price could change between nurseries and stock. There's a lot of external factors that can affect the price. Again, just an explanation to give you some background. And just to see where they're coming from.
I appreciate that, Christina. The fix here is not to reject this project or to go back to the homeowner and say, well, Jerry Peters really didn't like this so much. Can we negotiate something? The fix is that the steering committee or the technical committee should say, listen, we can spend $100 a square foot if we want. But is that reasonable? Can they come up with some kind of guidance for the eligibility for these types of projects so that we get the conservation we want without breaking the bank?
Jerry, this is John. One of the concerns that I think we started to raise when we dealt with permeable pavements, and this raises that issue again, Jerry, as you did, is that one of the things I have a problem with VCAP on is we never really get to the benefits. And take a look at what these projects are trying to accomplish. We talk a lot about what they are and what they're going to plant and how much it costs, but we don't talk about the benefits.
Right.
And that's something I'd really like. Kevin and I have talked about this a lot, and that's something I'd really like, Christina, you and the steering committee, to spend a little bit more time on this next year, because I think at some point we as a board are going to have to answer to our constituents on what are the benefits that we're getting from spending this money. It's not just aesthetic. It's not just a visual improvement of your property.
Absolutely, and that is something that the steering committee is looking at doing. We're looking at changing the reimbursement rates for permeable pavement moving into the new fiscal year, and I know that we will be forced to take a look at the cost benefit of these projects a little bit more closely in the next year, given the fact that, we are receiving a lot less cost share fund, or, we're forecasted to receive a lot less cost share funds in the coming year. So, in terms of equity of the program and making sure that everyone has a chance to participate, we'll have to look at that. On one hand, the program has a dual purpose. We certainly want to get the best bang for our buck in terms of project and, making sure everybody has a chance to partake in these projects. But on the other hand, it's also changing the status quo of how people think about their landscape on their own property. So it does provide a powerful outreach tool to individual landowners to sort of change the narrative of what we see as conventional landscaping and how it can benefit the environment. So certainly here, the cost benefit, argument and making sure that these projects are good, a good way to spend our taxpayer dollars. But I think we also need to keep in mind that we're also trying to change the status quo with them as well.
What is the visibility of this project for external, for the neighborhood and for the community?
Sorry, Monica, did you say what is the external benefit for the neighborhood in terms of outreach?
No, I was saying what's the visibility of the plantings for the neighbor, like for the neighborhood?
Sure. So the project is actually located in the backyard of this property, but these homeowners seem very motivated to, showcase their project. With all of our VCAP participants, we always ask them if they would be interested in attending or participating in our sustainable garden tour using their properties as an example. So, and we rarely ever get a no from our homeowners, but from the conversations Dan and I have, these homeowners seem very motivated to showcase their project when it's done. The landscape designer that they work with commonly does a lot of these conservation landscaping projects. So,
I'm wondering, sorry to interrupt you, I appreciate
go
that.
ahead.
That's good to know that. But from a perspective of going into moving forward and seeing potentially limitations, we're going to be coming up against a pretty big mountain here. We're going to have increased costs because of everything that's happening with the pandemic. We're also going to be having decreased funding coming in. So I'm wondering from a procurement standpoint, if there is an opportunity to that at least more than one landscape designer or to identify ways to bid COVID and have an idea of, two options for the homeowners, because I don't understand the cost of the plants, but it does seem a little high. And so that, how do we balance that? How do we get people to have an idea of thoughtful design and that's attractive and all of that, but also balancing potentially increasing costs that we're going to be seeing?
Sure. Yeah, and I definitely have talked with designers in the past and tried to get a better idea of what the process is like on site and then sort of how it looks like when they go back to the office and actually create these plans. I think from the contractor side, at the end of the day, VCAP, not taking VCAP into consideration, it is up to the homeowners to decide, what they deem acceptable to invest in a project like this. And I think this particular, I know it does seem a little expensive, but I mean, from the pictures that Dan showed in the earlier slides and pictures that we've seen from a previous presentation of this property, they are in need of, installing something. And they would like that to be a native plant landscape garden. But I also, see where you're coming from. We absolutely do need to make sure that we're fiscally responsible with our cost share dollars.
Christina, along those lines, the earlier pictures show a pretty high level of concentrated flow. Is this perimeter plantings going to stop or, ameliorate that at all?
I definitely think that this project will help with the bare vegetation issue that they're having, which is what their resource concern is erosion and bare vegetation. But it's only one part of the whole solution. And that's sort of what I tried to tell applicants that these are not like nail in the coffin solutions. These are merely just devices to help mitigate the issue, and it's an ongoing process. So I think that with the inclusion of the bioretention that they already have to combat all of the excess runoff coming from the uphill property, and then in combination with this conservation landscaping, you know, hoping that they keep up with the maintenance, which most of our VCAP applicants do. I think that these two projects definitely have the ability to help resolve a lot of what they're experiencing.
Christina, will there be anything else needed to really solve the problem?
Well, unsure. I think and Dan might feel free to chime in since you did the site visit, but just speaking from a general perspective, I always tell people to, people usually come to us with these grand, master plans, and I always encourage them to install one or two things and then adjust their master plan as needed if stormwater control on their property is a priority. So I have high hopes, and been working with this landscape designer for the past couple of years. I have high hopes that whatever she installs and designs and puts in on this property will help mitigate their problem. Will it solve it 100%? That'll be up to the homeowners and, what they observe in heavy rains after these projects are installed.
Well, normally landscape designers are not hydraulics engineers.
This particular landscape designer is CVLP certified, and she's been exclusively working in the sustainable landscape sphere. It's the focus of her business. Certainly, it wasn't always that way, but we know this landscape designer personally, and we know that that's her focus.
Christina, let me ask you about I think you said 7,000 feet of lawn that is tributary to this. I've asked this question before in other projects. Are we counseling the owners on what they can do with their turf to make it more permeable? Maybe we ought to do the Arlington study on this property and see if they've got a compaction problem too.
Jerry, if you heard Dan explain, they have done several times where they had tried to do some aeration and seeding and improve the soil in that area. So it seems to me that the homeowner has already tried some of those little tried and true tricks of doing that. One thing that I am looking at is some of the plant choices might be a little bit more. One is not a lot of choices. Two, the prices are more because there's not a lot of choices. I have heard from a lot of different landscapers that plants are just out of stock. Okay, so they're making substitutes, or they might hold off on planting a few of these. Some of these, Christina, you might want to see. As far as, when it comes to Acornis florida, for me, I would, for me, because it is Acornis florida, is that going to go, that's going to go in the shade, but, can you see what kind of variety they're going to have? Because there are some disease-resistant varieties that I would prefer to use.
Sure.
From the Rutgers Constellation series.
Mm-hmm.
There's like 5 or 6 different cultivars that are resistant to anthracnose, which is very common here. The other thing that I would like to suggest is, I see that there's some high bush blueberries there and some other things, is to really look at the plant size. Don't get caught up in the actual size of the planting, because that plant that is smaller is going to be more resistant to summer dryness and droughts, and it'll also be able to bounce back a lot quicker with some of these late freezes that we're having and early freezes, just like we had here in May around Mother's Day. And might I suggest that Jack in the Pulpit is quite a pricey plant for $9 a piece.
Mm-hmm.
9 of those and 19 wild columbines. I would look at some of these plants and just kind of would be curious, on the cost and the size. for that. And that might be, I also have heard, from some friends that once plants are out, they're out. They're not going to get any more this year in certain things in the nurseries
out of
because they're
stock.
just not available. I'm sorry?
You mean out of stock, right?
Yes,
Yes.
out of stock from the wholesaler.
Yep.
They are that. And the rains in 2018, the 66 inches of rain that we got here and across the eastern seaboard, that didn't help any of our nurseries because nurseries that had lower lying land that plants were underwater, those plants are not saleable. And so I know that some nurseries probably had to toss a few plants when it came to that year, that season. Or if they pushed it, they're now replacing those plants, if you know what I mean.
Interesting.
So just remember what situation we're in. Everybody's trying to get things shipped. Shipping costs cost more. Everything, because of this past seasons that we've had. 2018 was a really rough season, and we're seeing things dying from root rot now that just haven't made it. If you look around, you see all kinds of oak decline. It's very important, in my opinion, that that we stress that the plants that are going to be smaller are going to survive more, Christina. So
Absolutely.
if there's a way they can source some lesser, more reasonable plants, that would be great. But also understanding that there are transportation issues, there are a supply issue, and we definitely respect that.
Yeah, and to support Adria on that too, I just want to say capturing that version or written some kind of writing format so that if people down the road do come back and say, hey, please, during this period, this much was spent for whatever reason, that we have keeping them down with the price increases and associated costs relevant to a pandemic or crisis versus,
I'm only hearing about a third of what Monica says.
Yeah, I can't hear it either.
Sorry, can this better?
No, you just got a bad mic.
Yeah, I do. I'm sorry.
There you go. We can hear you better, Monica.
Okay.
If I can just paraphrase what I think you were saying is that you want to just make sure that we're capturing, am I muted? No, okay. Make sure that we're capturing the points that were being made in terms of the high costs of the plants during this COVID situation. Is that?
Exactly. I think we need to make sure we're capturing the price differential during the pandemic or a crisis situation, to have something in comparison to what would be kind of the norm or expectation and the upswing, so that it's not it doesn't remain at an upswing if things kind of normalize. So it's just a kind of a reference point.
I think in terms of, kind of trying to bring this conversation full circle, is recognizing that some of these projects, the costs do fluctuate, and where those areas of fluctuation are in terms of the overall costs are oftentimes, from what I have seen, related to designer costs and plants. And so I think that those, recognizing where those fluctuations are going to be and those inconsistencies is something important moving forward. In looking at this project, and I'd like to actually ask Dan a question of whether or not there are any other associated costs with this project, because even at 192 plants, if I know what a wild columbine is going to cost at a nursery, and that's not even wholesale of $25, maybe $30 a pot, it still comes out to be about a little less than $5,000 for just plants alone. Are there any soil amendments that they're making here, or can you talk a little bit, Dan, about any other costs that may be associated with this project?
Yes, there's a potential for soil amendments. That they were saying they don't have it necessarily written in. We're going to be adding 3 cubic yards of soil amendment compost, but they have that open as a possibility depending on the quality of the soil they find when they start digging.
They don't know yet?
What's that?
They don't know yet?
They don't know yet if they're going to be amending the soil, but they have it included as a potential cost.
And so it has been included in that overall cost.
Right.
Because then it would basically make this more of like a sponge garden by adding, so allow for increased infiltration if they added more of those, more compost and things like that.
My guess is they probably will have to add some, given how much erosion has occurred already.
It looks impacted.
The other costs that they have is the actual design costs are kind of folded into this as well too. So when a designer bids on one of these projects, they're taking a little bit of a risk, because in the off chance that the project does not get approved, they basically have done design work for free. So this design work is done already. As you can see, the planting plan is there, the illustrations are there, but no cost has been paid for that, nor would it be paid for that unless this project goes through, gets funded. So the design costs kind of get tacked in on the back end there as well too, even though the actual design has been created.
And I'm not sure, and Christine, maybe you can lean on this a little bit, whether or not that's an eligible cost that's allowable through the program right now. But even with that, I'm just looking at this. If they had just the plants and just the soil amendments, that would be over that $5,000 threshold, which would kick it to that full amount. But I don't know, again, if there's any changes that would need to be made or taken into consideration from the steering committee level. But I know that they do look at the overall costs as well as they're going through that process. But Christina, I don't know if you can.
Yeah, so the design cost is included in this project, but I will say at the steering committee level, we have been talking about whether we need to prorate the design costs based on the square footage being installed, because as we've seen at projects in our district, a lot of the times people will do like a master plan, and surely designing a master plan is a lot more than just, a normal landscape plan for one certain area. So there has been talk of, prorating it by square foot. Maybe we only include design costs up to a certain percentage. But again, before we make these policy decisions, we can't just arbitrarily make them. We do need to have the numbers to back it up as to why, we would decide to go that way. So we haven't made too much headway on that yet, but I know it's sort of like on the list of things to do.
Well, thank you. That helps to explain a little bit more of the overall costs associated with this, and thinking again about the differentiation between what it takes to actually do the project. Just the I was going to say bricks and mortar, but that's not right.
Yeah, just like materials and just like
right.
the bare roots of what makes the project the project.
Right, exactly.
John, I have another question for Christina, I guess.
Sure.
You're on the steering committee, and we don't want the steering committee to do our work for us, but do they actually take a look at all these costs on these kinds of landscaping projects?
So the steering committee will do preliminary sort of observations with all these projects. I believe that the TAC does a lot of the looking, they're the ones that do the closer look at the costs and everything, so that we can adjust reimbursement rates accordingly. Apologize for the extra noise. It's sharing work from home space.
This is Laura, and I'll say, that there's definitely still some work that can be done on the VCAP program, especially as it relates to costs. And one of the things that I can lean our hat on is some of the things that we have been doing to try to focus on the elements of the project that provide the most benefit from a water quality perspective, and really trying to highlight those in particular, and making them very good quality projects. It looks like from what I've heard, that there are still some questions and concerns about the overall cost of this project. And I think we've heard quite a bit of information about why at this particular time a project like this might be higher in cost, because of the lack of potential plants and things like that, and coming at a higher cost. I think looking at this, from a technical perspective, and looking at the amount of water that's coming through there, the ability to plant densely first, I think, is going to really help with the erosion issue that's coming through, and certainly adding the compost to that area, even though it looks like nice glenelg soil, will also certainly help with increased infiltration and potential lessening the potential impact for the downstream rain garden, which is good, as well as address and provide cover on that area of the property as well that's currently denuded. So I certainly hear what everyone is saying and agree that I think that there's still some work to be done in terms of looking at the overall cost of this. And Christina, I hope you'll be able to take that back to the steering committee as well and to the TAC and encourage them to look at that, continue to look at this further.
Christina, you can take the message to the steering committee that one of the board members here voted no on a project just because of the cost considerations.
Gotcha. And
So we still have to decide if we're going to approve this conservation landscaping project.
That's right.
One of the things I would comment on the steering committee, costs are pretty easy. It's the benefits that I think they need to spend some time on.
Yeah, understand.
But at any rate, we do have a motion and a second to approve this VCAP conservation landscaping project. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor signify by saying aye. All opposed say nay.
Nay. Jerry.
No one voted aye at all and one nay. Project is not authorized.
I thought something was, they were gonna go back and.
What's that?
I thought we were going back and double checking on some, cost
Well, are we,
considerations.
well, we can. We certainly can. Is that what we're asking them to do? Go back and check on some costs and then bring it back for authorization?
That's
Can
what
I,
Go ahead.
Monica, do you want to remove the motion?
Yeah,
Okay, since I made the motion and you seconded it. So John, can I remove that first motion, please?
Yes.
Okay. Can I make a second motion and make a motion to approve this plan with adjustments so that we have an opportunity to look at it again? Is that what you're asking, Monica?
yes.
And who would look and make those adjustments?
Well, conversation with our with the designer that Christina was going to have.
yeah, Dan and I can have a conversation with the homeowner and the landscape designer, if that's what it sounds like is what we're suggesting.
Yes, I think that that's what, I mean, I don't think that we overall want to deny the project. I think that what I'm hearing as a collective from, without seeing everyone's face, is that we'd like to have the homeowner move forward with the idea of the project with some adjustments. So.
I definitely agree. I think that there's a lot of erosion on that. I think it would showcase a good opportunity, but I would like to see some additional considerations and thought.
So Adria, you made the motion and Monica seconded. Is that right? That we approve this conservation landscaping plan with some modifications discussed with the landowner and the landscape architect?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Yes.
All right, we have a motion and a second. Is there any further discussion?
That's not just a request to go back and look at it and then come back to us. That's approving it contingent that they make some cost adjustments.
Yes. Right now, the Cornus florida that is on that list is not acceptable to me. So, in my opinion, there are other things, other plant choices that are not acceptable to our current, from our board members that we've had a discussion. However, I think that perhaps this designer can take a look at some of the plant choices and rethink some of them. And that's what I'm saying, John.
And I guess another question I would ask, is it critical that this be approved this month so it can get to the steering committee? If it's going to?
So at the steering committee level and the statewide level right now, we do have a wait list of projects. Where this project ranks out, I will have to go back and check what the actual ranking is from the state level. I don't want to just throw out some random number because I just don't remember. But I would say from like a time perspective, there's a lot of projects on that list already. So I would say that there is no rush. I'm sure the homeowners would feel differently, but it's not like they would likely get approved this month anyways.
Any further discussion?
Sorry, it sounded like Dan had something to say. Did you mention something, Dan?
I just looked up the ranking. It's 81.4, so not too high, but meets our minimums.
Meets the minimum, and that's actually a pretty decent score for conservation landscaping, I would say.
Any further discussion?
I just wanted to make one point of clarification. Does anybody have any particular concerns about the integrity of this project, aside from the costs and aside from some of the plant selection? Is there any other concerns with that? From a technical facet, are we comfortable moving this forward?
Well, it looks like there's a need there of a problem to resolve, and it's just hard to, assess the planting schedule versus the hydrology of the site.
I mean, I know that we're hung up on the costs, and I think from a technical perspective, the density of the plants is warranted. Now, it sounds like there's some questions about the plant selection and the pallets, and we can definitely, from a technical perspective, have that conversation with the landscape designer.
Mm-hmm.
But, just to put it into perspective, this project might not even go in till the fall. So the cost for this project could drop a significant amount based on plant availability and if this landscape designer were to slate this project for a fall installation. So I just wanted to put that out there as well.
Well, no, Christine, that brings up an interesting question. That is, once we approve it for whatever, $9,900, if the costs go down, does it stay at $9,900?
Well, remember, this is $9,900 cost for the project itself. They're asking for $3,500 in cost share. So chances are the cost share won't change because they'd have to drop the price below $5,000 total if they were going to get close to not meeting the $3,500 75% cost share match. So even if it gets cheaper, the cost share probably will stay the same. Almost certainly will stay the same, I should say.
Thank you. Good point, Dan.
Say that. And, a lot of these projects when projects do drop in overall installed costs, we do prorate the cost share. So if they were to drop below $5,000, we would adjust the cost share accordingly, and we let homeowners know that up front.
So that's an excellent point. I'll be paying $3,500 for this, no matter how much the designer is able to tweak the plant selection.
Yes, almost certainly.
Correct.
Well, even at $5,000 for a project this size, unless there's something really extraordinary in terms of soil amendment or accessibility, they have to do everything by hand for 100 yards or something. I don't even see it for $5,000.
This is Laura again, and I think the challenge is kind of what Adria had pointed out before, which is the plant selection types. Those are very expensive plants. I just bought a wild columbine myself from a nursery, and they can be quite expensive if you're purchasing them. And again, I think it has a lot to do with where they're sourcing those plants and what those ultimate costs are. So plus the installation costs of them as well. So I think from what I've heard is right now, if I can just repeat what the motion is, the motion, which was made by Adria and seconded by Monica, was to move to approve the plan contingent with the adjustments to the planting palette suggested by Adria, and also based upon further discussion with the homeowner and designer regarding the overall cost of the project.
That's what I understood. Are we ready for a vote on the motion? Let's have a recorded vote. I'll start with Jerry. All in favor signify by saying aye. Jerry?
I'm going to vote no.
Chris?
I'm ambivalent. I'm not sure what to do.
I'll come back to you. Monica?
Aye.
Adria?
Aye.
Chris?
I'd rather see it deferred, so I don't know how to vote. To see how they come back and express consideration, so I'll abstain.
The chairman will vote aye. So we can move this project forward. We've had a lot of good discussion. You still know where I stand. I don't think the VCAP program deals well with benefits at all. But I hope Christina and the staff can go back, as Adria suggested, take a good look at these costs and the plantings. And maybe Adria could help them a bit, since that's one of her areas of expertise. But let's get it at least on the list for the steering committee.
Got it. Well, thank you everybody for the feedback. I will certainly bring back these points to the steering committee, because I'm sure we'll probably have the same discussion on Friday. So I'd be happy to bring that back, and we'll go back and talk with the homeowners.
And we look forward to the response you get at the steering committee, Christina.
Absolutely.
And Adria, could we talk offline about some of your suggestions? I know I took notes on them, but I want to make sure I get the planting plan suggestions down to bring to the designer and homeowner.
Sure.
Great.
I think Christina and Dan, we're now down to maybe some project reimbursement authorizations.
We are. So I will go ahead and talk about those. So our first project is actually not a VCAP payment, it is a CAP payment. This is from the Towns at Waterford located in Reston. Just to give you guys a quick refresher on the existing site conditions before. They were experiencing a lot of runoff from impervious surface from the road and the parking lot, in addition to the sidewalks. So these are just some pictures of the before conditions. They had a couple of trees in there, but generally located on a slope, lots of bare soil. So they wanted to get some conservation landscaping in there to help mitigate some of that erosion. This is just another picture of the conditions before. And these are some pictures after. So they did quite a large conservation landscaping installation, and now these neighbors that back up to this area have a nice landscape feature to look at. So this is just a picture after, and this is another picture from another angle. If you guys remember, we worked with the Towns of Waterford extensively before on an infiltration trench and conservation landscaping project in another area of the community. And that project, from what I've heard, is still doing quite well. This is another picture of that area. So our next VCAP payment was a conservation landscaping project that we approved back in January. So these are just some pictures before of that site. Another picture here. And then this is a picture afterwards. So they installed some nice shrubs and herbaceous material in these areas. And they're actually looking at slowly getting rid of a lot of the turf in their front yard, from what the homeowner told me when we were scheduling her inspection. So this is sort of just, one step in the right direction in terms of planting more native plants and getting rid of the managed turf. And our last VCAP payment for this month, located right off of Sleepy Hollow Road, another large conservation landscaping project in the backyard of this homeowner. This backyard is pretty sloped, so they basically wanted to incorporate a lot more native plants to help mitigate some of that erosion and put more shade-tolerant plants to help cover the soil. So again, another picture before. And these are just some pictures after installation. This project actually interesting. The homeowner designed the entire project herself, and her husband did all of the installation. They had very little contractor help. I think they might have had some contractor help, amending the soil and doing a lot more of that heavy lifting. But most of the installation was done by this homeowner and her husband. So large project that they took on by themselves, and it's great to see people getting their hands in the ground. So another view here, and then just another view of that project here and here. So this is a project that's involved scene. I have high hopes for maintenance with this project. So does anybody have any questions of the projects for approval? None of these projects changed in costs. They were pretty on the ball or on the mark with their costs from project submission to project completion. So the cost share is staying the same for all of them.
What were the total costs of those compared to the last one we had the extensive discussion on?
So the first project, Pounds of Waterford project, I don't have the exact numbers in front of me, but I do generally know. So that first project was about $11,000 for 3,000 square feet. The first VCAP project before this one came in at $6,000 for about 800 square feet. And then this project was also about 3,000 square feet and came in around $7,000. So the costs definitely do vary from company to company. The Homeowners Association has a long-standing relationship with the people that they contracted for that particular project. So that actually came in sort of right on mark with their other conservation landscaping project that they did that was also quite large and quite dense in terms of their plantings. Also, depending on the scope and size of the contracting company and landscape designer in general, those larger companies tend to have a much larger reach in terms of sourcing plants, whereas smaller landscaping firms, which is what a lot of our native plant landscape designers are, they either work for themselves and contract the work to installers, or they just have smaller firms in general. They might not have as established relationships and sourcing abilities as those larger contractors do. So just wanted to put that out there to give a little bit of perspective.
That's good.
All three of these projects qualified for the maximum cost share?
They actually, yes, they did. Yep. Yep.
So all we need to do is, at this point, authorize their reimbursement?
Yes.
Is there a motion to reimburse these three projects which were previously approved?
I'll make a motion to reimburse for approval.
Second, Jerry.
Been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, well, we'll do the roll again. All in favor signify by saying aye. Jerry?
Aye.
Chris?
Aye.
Adria?
Aye.
Monica?
Aye.
We don't need the nays. It's been approved. Any other discussion on that? By the way, I think we all got all the partner reports and staff reports, but we haven't talked at all about the tree commission or the ERC or the green breakfast. Do we want to have a little something on the tree commission, Jerry?
Yeah, the tree commission has not met because of the coronavirus problem. We've not come up with a fix for meeting remotely, so there's nothing to report. I would say that we're working with, we had a tree charrette on March 12th. I think I've talked about it before. It was a great meeting. Laura went to it. I went to it. The report that I got from Urban Forestry on the charrette was simply a montage of the poster boards where people, this is the way the charrette was conducted, was people would come up with ideas and stick them on poster boards. It was a lot of fun, and the pictures were very informative. I think that we might get more value out of that charrette by somebody sitting down and analyzing what the consensus was. And I don't see anybody doing that yet, but hopefully something will come out of that, because I thought it was a very productive day spent thinking about these things. We'll see.
Thank you, Jerry. Laura, I don't think we have Assad on for the ERC, or you or Harry for the green breakfast. You want to say something?
In terms of the green breakfast, I think we talked about it actually during our May 15th meeting.
You did?
And at this point, I don't have anything additional to add, except for, and we're going to talk a little bit about this once I have an opportunity to kind of share my report. But we do envision doing the green breakfasts virtually for some time to come. The population that tends to come to the green breakfast is a little bit more vulnerable. We can talk a little bit more about this, but I'm hoping to have some conversations with Harry and others as we move forward in terms of how we make that happen.
But we had good attendance with what we did, right?
We had very good attendance. We had 54 people join us back on May 9th. And so that was very good. And some familiar names who don't oftentimes come to the green breakfast, but who were able to participate virtually. So that was very good.
In terms of partners, I know we have Debbie on from DCR. We have her report. Debbie, you still there?
I am. I'm still here. You have my report there. The one thing I did want to say, since I revised my report, it's actually been revised yet again, and that is the Soil and Water Board was not able to meet on May the 20th because the budget had not been signed. The governor did sign it either the 21st or 22nd, and they rescheduled their meeting for June the 3rd. So June the 3rd, the Soil and Water Board will be having an electronic meeting, and they will be at that time handling all of their business from March, April, and May. At that meeting, they have provided their meeting agenda and materials on the town hall. So that would include the policies for admin and operations, as well as for cost share for fiscal year 21, as well as grant agreements for both of those, and our fiscal year 21 agriculture BMP cost share manual. So they have some damn things they need to do at that meeting. So because it's an electronic meeting, anybody that wants to log in is able to do so. But after that June the 3rd meeting, we'll be able to move forward with getting grant agreements out, and we will know more firmly that our cost share allocations and our admin and operations funds are all in place. They were in the governor's budget, so we're not concerned about that. But until the Soil and Water Board actually takes action on their policies, we kind of have to wait for that. So that's really the only thing that I needed to kind of add to the report.
Thank you, Deb. I noticed that, I think it was Chris asked you a question, Laura, about the green breakfast.
Yes, I was just typing him back, but I'll just say it out loud here. The question that Chris asked was whether or not the green breakfast was recorded and archived, and it was. Actually, we have it posted right now to our Facebook page, but we are, Ashley has been working on making some adjustments to our website so that we can add links to the various webinars and our green breakfast programs so that they are available. This is actually something we've talked about doing for quite some time, which is to have the virtual option, so folks who do not attend the green breakfast can then watch it later if they're so inclined. And so this will be an option that's available. But again, right now it is available on our Facebook page.
Thank you, Laura. Do we have anybody on? Laura, do you know, from Stormwater Planning?
We do not. I did not see anybody who. Katie is not on.
Or Public Health?
No.
Or how about Department of Forestry? Jim?
I did not see Jim on either today.
And no one from NRCS?
No, but Jeff Barr did provide his report, and it was included along with the
Yes,
staff reports.
we have those. Is there anything else to come before the Board of Directors? If not, I would commend the staff again for helping us conduct this electronic meeting, which we're all getting used to, but I think it's working satisfactorily. And I really appreciate all of you who tuned in, particularly the associates.
I think it's more than satisfactory. This is pretty good.
Yes. If there's nothing else to come before the board for the May meeting, is there a motion that we adjourn?
I'll move for adjournment.
It's been moved, we adjourn. Is there a second?
Chris, second.
Been moved and seconded. Jerry? All in favor signify by saying aye. Jerry,
Aye.
Adria,
Aye.
Chris,
Aye.
Monica.
Aye.
No need for any nays. Thank you all. Appreciate it.
Thank you. Good to hear from everybody.
Nice to hear from everybody too. And we'll be looking at our next meeting on June 23rd. So stay tuned for more information on that.